So Senator Martin's remarks are a good segue into our next panel on empowering parents. I'm going to introduce the moderator, and he's going to introduce you to his panel. The moderator for our next panel on empowering parents is Michael Geer. Many of you know Michael as the president, the founding president of the Pennsylvania Family Institute. He served in that role since 1989. It is one of the largest family policy councils in the nation, and he serves on the national board of the Family Policy Alliance. Prior to doing that, he had a background in the media, working for several television news organizations. He and his wife, Susan, have 5 children and 6 grandchildren. We're getting old, Michael. When I think of Michael Geer, I think of these things: leadership, citizenship, faith, and family. To lead our next panel discussion, I introduce to you the president of the Pennsylvania Family Institute, my friend Michael Geer.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to be here and great to be introduced by my good friend, Guy Shearer. I appreciate him and have known him for years as a leader on school choice, as a spokesman for what is right in our state, and grateful also to be following Senator Scott Martin. I've known him for years, from when he was a county commissioner in Lancaster County. He's been a champion and a fighter. We heard C.L. Bryant talk about needing to stand up and fight, and Scott Martin is that very thing on the school choice issue. On the sanctity of life, he was the leader of the Down Syndrome Protection Act, which was passed in the General Assembly, only to be vetoed by Governor Wolf as well. Well, I want to introduce our panelists here. First, one of them is a school board member. Christina Brussalis was elected in November of 2021 and serves in the Pine Richland School District, which is in the North Hills of the Pittsburgh area, Pittsburgh suburb. She spent almost 2 decades as a consultant helping organizations identify strategic opportunities and align resources to achieve goals. Most recently, she was vice president of the Hill Group, a national consulting firm serving major corporations, institutions, governments, and nonprofits. She served under 2 U.S. presidents and was a public relations staffer for 2 secretaries of defense and a member of Congress. She earned a Bachelor of Arts from Baldwin-Wallace College. She with her husband live in the North Hills in Richland Township with their 4 children. Also to her right then is Rob Shearer, who's the owner of, along with his wife and business partner, Deborah, of several companies focused on supply chain logistics, including, I won't name all the companies, but his companies serve 7 of the top 10 medical device manufacturers in the world. But on this topic here of parental rights and children's rights, he is co-founder and vice chairman of the Board of Trustees of St. Joseph's Catholic Academy, chairman of the board of the Commonwealth's Children's Choice Fund of Pennsylvania, and on the board of trustees of our good friends at the Commonwealth Partners Chamber of Entrepreneurs. He's a graduate of Pittsburgh Central Catholic. I think that's where Dan Marino was a quarterback way back.
Oh, he's one of the lesser-known
grads,
yeah.
Right. He earned a BA from Duquesne University and did graduate work in economic development and public policy at Gannon University. And lastly, I'll introduce my friend Ken Stracuzzi, who's a strategic advisor to the Pennsylvania Family Institute. He's a business leader from Bucks County, Pennsylvania, but also leads a grassroots group called Hope for Pennsylvania, Hope for PA, and is doing tremendous grassroots work there and across the Commonwealth, encouraging parents and school board members and others to make a difference in our society. So let me grab a seat here and make a few opening comments before I turn it first to Christina. Back in 1925, the United States Supreme Court overturned an Oregon law that required parents or guardians to send their children to public school in the districts where they lived. No choice. All public school. The Society of Sisters, which ran private academies, claimed that the law interfered with the rights of parents to choose religious instruction for their children. The court agreed unanimously. States are permitted to run and regulate schools, even to require that all children receive an adequate education, said the court, but the justices held that the state may not unreasonably interfere with the liberty of parents and guardians to direct the upbringing and education of children under their control. Now, in that ruling came a very famous phrase, and it's in the court decisions called Pierce versus the Society of Sisters. And this memorable turns of phrase in Supreme Court history is this: the child is not the mere creature of the state. The child is not the mere creature of the state. If we look at the state of education in Pennsylvania and America, there are many in our society who do believe the child and ultimately the family are subservient and subsets of the state. And this panel is going to discuss a little bit about that, but really about issues of school choice, of how we impact public schools, where the vast majority of children in Pennsylvania go and will continue to go in the future, and then how we as grassroots Pennsylvanians, as citizens who are called to be involved and make a difference in our society, can do so. So with that, let me turn it over to Christina to talk about her role in probably the most thankless job in America, a public school board member. So, Christina.
Thank you very much. I was elected in 2021 to the school board, and I was part of that wave of parents that we saw here in Pennsylvania and across the country who saw what was happening in our classrooms. Well, number one, that we weren't in the classrooms. The schools were shut down and our kids were at home, and we saw that they weren't learning. And then we also had a window into what was happening in our classrooms, not just during COVID, but also generally in the day-to-day, even beforehand, and we didn't like what we saw. And so we stood up and we ran for office. And I feel like Senator Martin really laid out some of the issues that we were experiencing and seeing, so I'm not going to repeat all that. But one thing I did want to give an example on the academic side of what our children experience because of the poor decision-making of our officials at every level of government. Taking a look at our PSSA results. And I'm talking to a group of Pennsylvanians, so I think most of us are probably familiar with what the PSSAs are, but they're Pennsylvania's assessment of academic performance. And Pine Richland, my school district, has traditionally always been one of the top schools in the state, always performing at or above schools that were in the top decile of PSSA results. And when we took a look at the results of our PSSAs, and I'm going to give you an example from our 8th grade class because I feel like middle school is such an important time in a kid's educational career that what happens there is so pivotal. So in and I got to look at my notes here, in 2019, pre-pandemic, our 8th graders performed at 67% proficiency in mathematics. In 2022, post-pandemic, 8th graders at Pine Richland, again, one of the top performing schools in the state, were at 48% proficiency in math. Same with the 7th graders. Our 7th graders actually hadn't improved over their 6th grade results. So in our middle schools, 1 in 2 kids was not proficient in mathematics. And then in my research and preparing for this, I was looking at what the results were statewide in other schools, and I counted 400 schools, not school districts, so the individual buildings, the schools themselves. There were over 400 schools in our state that had 0 proficiency across grades. And so whether you are your kids are performing at 0% proficiency, 25% proficiency, or even 50% proficiency, we are failing our children. And it has gotten dramatically worse since the COVID shutdowns. So what happens in schools, I believe, matters to everyone. It's not just the parents who have kids in the schools, but I believe that it's I used this example before, that it's the retired steelworker who has spent a lifetime working hard to raise his family in a home that he paid for quite literally with his blood, sweat, and tears. It matters to that kid fresh out of college who wants to have those opportunities right here in their backyard so that they don't have to move away from their family and everything that they've known. So I feel that schools are the lifeblood of our communities, and we need to make sure for our children, for our current community, but for our future, that our schools are strong and vibrant and are doing the job that they're supposed to be doing. The success of our schools are going to determine how successful Erie is, how successful Pittsburgh is going to be, and how successful Philadelphia is going to be as we're competing nationally and in this global world globally. So we need to make sure we're doing the job that we were set out to do. And I've said this, I think, when we talked initially, that I believe that if you want to save America, we have to save our schools. And everyone in this room knows how important Pennsylvania is politically in our national politics. So if we want to save America, I think that it starts right here, right in our backyards and in our communities, by making sure that we have, we're holding our schools accountable to the job that they're supposed to be doing. So, you know, I feel like I've talked probably way too long, but I think there are 3 things that everyone can be doing. And I mean everyone, whether your kids are in school now or they graduated 20 years ago, or if they're in the local private school. Everyone has a role. And I think, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't say, we need you to run for school board. Moms and dads are great candidates, but, you know, even if you're retired and your kids haven't been in the schools for a few decades, you still have, or if you have no children, you still have an important role to play, and we need more conservative voices serving on our school boards. And in that note, just quickly, when you get elected, I want to know who you are, because we have been working statewide to try to connect the conservative school directors so that we can have a collective voice in Harrisburg, but also to serve as a resource to each other. So if you are running for school board, if you're on school board, you know someone who's running for school board, please stop me. I want to connect with you. The other important thing that I really believe will move the needle in your community, whether you have a conservative school board or it's very left-leaning, is start a parents group. Back in Pine Richland, my rock star parents group leader is here in the room today. She has changed things for the better just by showing up with her parents. Go to the school board meetings, connect, and if you don't have a group, create one. I was recently at the Pennsylvania School Board Association's conference, and I will tell you 80% of the time, actually more than that, probably 90% of the time, I don't agree with what the Pennsylvania School Board Association tells me that I should be in line with. And they had an entire workshop about creating parents groups and having a goal of having parents groups in every school district. We need to beat them to it. We need to plant parents groups that are conservative and fighting for conservative values in every school across the state. And lastly, the most important thing we can do is to hold our leaders accountable at the ballot box. So find out who your school board candidates are, find out where they stand, and then spread the word about people that are going to make real conservative change in your communities. And then, of course, make sure to get out and vote.
Okay. Thank you, Christina. Rob, your engagement has been especially on providing options for families, both in terms of your own local community as well as then statewide with the work that you're doing with Commonwealth. Can address that and give us some tips on how people can engage in that way.
Yeah, very quickly. Education freedom is my second job, and take it very seriously. In 2003, when my wife and I and our kids moved back to Pennsylvania from New York, we settled in State College, there was no school choice. There was no alternative in our school for high school. And as somebody who'd gone to Catholic schools my whole life, that was a concern of mine. So I was fortunate to meet 4 other dads who felt the same way, and we began a 7-year journey to create a Catholic high school in our area. And of course, plenty of folks telling us, no, it can't be done, and nobody's opening schools, they're closing schools. But because of a lot of divine intervention along the way, by 2011, we opened. And with 24 students in 2 grades, today we're averaging between 130 and 160 kids. And our results are tremendous. We've got 100% college placement since in the 11 years we've been operating. And last year, our 24 graduates received offers of over $2 million in scholarship funds. So the reality is it can be done. And when we started, I knew very little about I knew a lot about supply chain. I didn't know a lot about running schools, and but fortunately, there are some tremendously talented people out there. So my message to anyone who thinks that they're dissatisfied with their current situation and is concerned about what they can do about it. First of all, some general thoughts on the topic. I believe firmly, my experience has shown over the last 11 years, all students deserve an option. All families deserve an option. And sometimes it's our job to make that option happen. Your success should not be defined by your zip code or decisions other people have made about education in your area. The free market works, folks. You all are here because of that. It works in education tremendously well, maybe better than some other areas. The taxpayers funding monopoly does not make sense. It's anti-American as far as I'm concerned. Free Americans will make beautiful, surprising, successful choices if you let them. And just a couple of final notes, and I'll let it go. The biggest thing, though, is knowing that you're not alone. There are tremendous supports out there. Build a coalition, find families who agree with you, and then just move forward. Our dear Lord in heaven will help you find a way. And the results are that we've got several hundred graduates that are doing tremendously good things in our community.
So we're going to follow up with some questions of both of you, but I want to get to Ken to talk a little bit about your work, because you're not directly involved with any particular school. You're not an educator. What is it that you do? No, so you're terrifically involved with grassroots and encouraging people to be involved. And as we look at our society and what's going on in the schools, I mean, if I were to describe, if Time Magazine were being truthful, which is a pipe dream, in terms of choosing Person of the Year or whatever, in 2021, I think they would have said it's the year of the parent. We saw Glenn Youngkin elected. We saw, last year at the PLC, we at Pennsylvania Family Institute hosted a workshop with Luke Rosiak from Daily Wire, who talked about, he was the guy who exposed the whole scandal in Loudoun County School District with the student being raped and so on and so forth. The parents were engaged. You're on the ground in places where parents are engaged. What do you have to say about involvement and making a difference?
Thank you, Michael. I guess I'll start by telling you what I did wrong. When I entered this space, I had this idea that I was coming in as a person of faith, as a Christian, really passionate about my faith, but I thought, you're going into the public arena, you're going into the public square, and so you have to follow their rules. You got to go in there, and you got to be the guy that stands up at the microphone and I don't know, you've seen the characterizations. We're angry, we're frustrated. And so I entered that space thinking, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to be that angry guy. So I went in there thinking I had to follow the rules of the game, so to speak. But what I found is that this space, the local school district, school board, grassroots space, is starving for believers who will live their faith right in that place. People that will go and love and care and build relationships. That's what I found. And I found that we need that more and more. You've heard speakers talk about, the theme seems to be, how do we let our faith inform our practice? It's time that we do that. And I was on the bench for a long time. You talk to me afterwards, I'll tell you why I was on the bench. But essentially, I think I was doing the right things, but this was an area that I completely ignored. And now I'm finding that if the public arena was a soil, or is a soil, it's parched. It's parched. It is crying out for the water of God's word. It's crying out. The soul is crying out. Those that disagree with us may not know it, but they need the truth of the scripture. So we're encouraging believers in our community to come in and do what they know how to do. Come in and pray. Come in and build relationships. When I sit in the office of a state rep in my community or a school board member, I say to them, the principles of the scripture will never do anything but bless our society. Right? What's the harm of us loving each other? What's the harm of us maybe considering someone above ourselves? Maybe loving our enemy? How are our kids gonna be hurt by anything like that? So that's my encouragement. Step in. We are upfront about our faith from the first step.
So I bet there's a bunch of people in the audience right now who are thinking, well, wait a minute, does that mean you just roll over? And so in the school district where you are engaging with other parents and whatever, that they have policies with explicit books and CRT in the school district and all kinds of awful stuff. And you're just like, hey, be well, so do you fight? Are the parents fighting?
Look,
are they standing up for what's right?
Sure. We can't do this without the truth. So we have to tell the truth. But what I'm finding is, first of all, thank you for being a school board member. And if you were in our town, we would be encouraging our people to go to coffee with you and sit with you and talk with you. Because most of the time, we are more reasonable than the talking points or what would you call it, the polarization or the characterization that is out there in the media. So I say to people, let me see if I can get this right. I will not believe what I hear about you if you will not believe what you hear about me. So we start with that relationship. Let's learn what you really think, not what the media says you think, but let's learn what you really think, and then have a conversation. And that really is a quote fight, because we're going to disagree. There's a lot to disagree about, and we do passionately, but we do it with truth, and we try to do it based on building a relationship first whenever possible. The public comments are important at a school board meeting, and to encourage good school board members. I think you guys are supported by that, right?
Oh, very much so. I think it doesn't, when you stand up, I feel like often it feels like it's not accomplishing something, but it is. It's encouraging me as a school board member to keep fighting the fight and raising issues, and even I think it does sway votes. But it also puts the pressure on our administrators that there are groups of parents who don't always agree with what we're doing, and we need to hear those voices. And I feel like parents coming and speaking out have really changed perspective, opened up the opportunities for conversation and to make change.
Let me ask you a question. Oh, go ahead, Rob.
So just a quick comment. I think it's more than a civic duty. There's a moral obligation of us not to allow administrators to be able to live in echo chambers, to languish in echo chambers, because that's easy. Good public policy is hard, and hearing the other side is critical. So we can't be quiet.
And most often, that echo chamber means that no one is telling them the truth. No one is speaking the truth out of a relationship and saying, have you considered it this way? First of all, have you even seen the explicit books that you're mentioning? Like, have you even seen what the argument is about? And oftentimes they have not. So we want to build those relationships. If you can throw that photograph up on the screen. So what church parking lot is that? You recognize that church parking lot? Well, you won't, because that's out in front of a Bucks County school board meeting. And they are believers who are in a circle in the parking lot before the meeting, and they are calling every school board member's name out and asking the Lord to bless them. They are calling out the name of the superintendent. They are calling out the name of good, solid candidates that will run in 2023. How many of you know you have a school board race in 2023 in your town? Yeah. Find out the conservatives in your town and please vote. In our town, we had one person win the race by 3 votes.
Wow.
3 votes. So imagine if our churches were mobilized, just that piece alone.
Could I just add one quick thing
Yes, sure,
about
go
the
ahead.
relationships? Because I do appreciate that. In my job, you're thrown into a position to make decisions about in our school district, we have $100 million budget and lots of moving pieces. I need the help of parents, and you can't get the help of parents unless you have that relationship to help me work through the curriculum and all the issues that are coming through. It is too much for one person. So building a relationship so that you can have someone to lean on to in the community who can help you through some of the big issues.
Let me ask you a question, Christina, because I experienced this, I'll call it a syndrome, from back in the early 90s. I lived in a Lancaster County community, and conservatives worked really hard to get some school board members elected in their school district. And then the way I describe it is the conservative citizens thought, because of tax issues and other things, the school situation was like a 5-alarm fire. And so they think, okay, we're going to get these new conservative school board members to go in and fight that fire, send in the brigade to fight the 5-alarm fire. The school board rushes in, we've elected them, and then the citizens disconnect the fire hose at the truck and drive away and think, okay, you're going to go fight the battle for us.
Yes.
And the citizens are not heard from or seen again oftentimes. What's been your experience? I don't want you to put people on the spot back in your district or whatever, but I'm sure you had lots of people who said, go for it, run and get elected, and worked on your campaign, and then...
I think it's still a very real thing. And if, back to connecting, like it's a place for everyone in the community, no matter whether your kids are in school or not. Like, I think conservatives often say, well, I elected this person, and then we expect them to just do their job. Right. And, I feel like we're trying to do our job and doing it the best that we can, but it is such a huge job that we need the help. Whether, like I said, through the curriculum, helping us, review things, or even just showing up and making sure that the things that we wanted to get done, that we have the political pressure from the community to keep moving things forward. Because I find like the fight, we are in a position where we have a majority on our board of conservatives. However, the fight is often with the administration, not with our fellow school directors, although watching our meetings, you might not notice that. But it is really about fighting the way that things have always been done, and making change is always hard. So having community members coming out and continue to support us past Election Day, I think is critical and key to success.
So I'm going to go to a question to Rob in just a moment, but I want to ask you one more question, Christina, which relates to, you mentioned the PSBA, the Pennsylvania School Boards Association. So basically a basic or rational understanding of, you have the teachers union, the PSEA, and then the school boards have the School Boards Association. So you're getting, I guess my experience and what I've even heard from you in recent conversations is they're kind of working together. They're sort of on the same team, yes, rather than what you might expect, which is they're providing divergent points of view. What has been your experience in in that field?
I feel like that's exactly my experience. When I get the emails to lobby my legislator on issues, 9 times out of 10, that's not what I would tell my legislator. And so what I find that, and I believe there are more conservatives across the state. I know PSBA did its own study, and I think it was 54% of school directors are Republicans. I believe that if we have an organization that supports conservative school directors, we are going to see that come into action not only in school board policy, but also at the state level. Because the resources coming out, there's nothing that's going to help me talk about conservative issues in a conservative way that's coming out of PSBA, or even white papers, or any kind of research that's really pushing some of the things that I think need to get done. So I think it's a very real thing, and we do need to have some more supports.
So, Rob, a question I wanted to ask you. Senator Martin spoke very compellingly about the need for expanded school choice in Pennsylvania, and about the EITC program, for example. You, in helping start and lead a private school in your community, to what extent is, for example, the grants that come in, the scholarships from the EITC program important for the expanding of parental choice and of supportive schools like yours?
It's tremendously important. How big did you say your budget was?
$100 million.
Right. Ours is 2.1, and of that, 1/3 comes from EITC. OSTC, et cetera. It's a significant piece, and that has actually radically increased, again, thanks to folks like Commonwealth for making that happen. But it's a tremendous differentiator, and the critical component for us has been, because there are very few parents, business owners that you approach, and when they finally understand what it is and how it works, it's a no-brainer. It's a slam dunk, and it is probably one of the most compelling catalysts that we have, or important catalysts we have for allowing school choice to occur. Because at the end of the day, you got to have funds to operate.
Yeah, when I think about that 1925 Supreme Court ruling that basically said, you know, that children are not mere creatures of the state, and that the state cannot impose its requirement that everybody goes to the public school. Even if the law doesn't require it, financially it becomes such a burden on families without school choice that it in effect is doing what the Supreme Court said should not be done. And it's why we at Pennsylvania Family Institute have been long advocates for school choice and participating in expanding those efforts as well. We just have about a minute left, so I could make some rapid comments. I want to give any of you have any 15-second things you want to say?
Yeah, I'll take this. You know, the kids that come to our school, their families pay taxes like every other family, but they will never get the benefit of it until we pass a school choice where the money follows the child. It will be the single biggest game changer we could ever have in the state of Pennsylvania to allow a pluralistic approach to school, because all schools don't have to be the same.
Well, we got 30 seconds, so I'll fill the last 30 seconds. I want to thank my panelists, first of all, thank all of you, thank Loman Henry for the opportunity to present these education issues. I remember last year at the PLC, there was a mom carrying around a book that was part of her son's school with explicit materials, and she was desperate, going to every politician saying, do something about this. The politicians, many of them don't know what to do. We as individuals, if we get involved in a local school district and speak up and engage in the way that we've described here, we can make a difference for desperate moms like that whose kids are being challenged because of what's in our schools. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Michael.
Great job.